A love triangle. Chapter 4. I thought I was pretty thorough. I worked with Jerry, our accountant, even the guy I went to for counseling, to make the split as close to 50-50 as possible. We were hopelessly intertwined in many areas, and I intended to keep the joint ownership until we had to interact so often. My son-in-law worked for us as a foreman, and my son worked for another construction company in a neighboring state to get an idea of how the business worked. Julie was in her second year of law school and was going to specialize in real estate law. The plan when we retired was for them to take joint ownership and continue the family business. I was afraid that if she resisted and we were forced to sell out to settle, that plan would go down the drain. Of course, that was another weapon in her arsenal. She fought every measure like a rabid dog, threatening to shut everything down until we got a resolution. She knew it would put us out of business. Mediation was flatly rejected, and we were forced to go to court. Both of our attorneys were good, and when the main reason for my seeking a divorce was about to come to light, they convinced the judge to let them explain themselves in private. Bonnie looked well, though tired. I later learned that she had deliberately stayed awake for almost 48 hours to accomplish this. The judge's eyes grew wider and wider as we explained what had happened. Bonnie wanted me to back out of the divorce. I told her I would drag the names of everyone involved through the mud and make sure it became public. In the end, the judge wasn't too pleased. "Well, it's certainly a mess, don't you agree? Honestly, I'm inclined to grant the divorce, but it seems there's more to come here. Sir, your wife made a mistake. A huge mistake. But I've seen couples overcome worse things. I think I should demand counseling. If nothing else, it might make the divorce go more smoothly. On the other hand, if you absolutely cannot forgive or come to terms with what she did and the counselor agrees, I would give the divorce as soon as the sessions are over. I think 8 would be an acceptable number. Now, the order. Choose any counselor. The court can give you the list we use regularly or any other. Start in 2 weeks at the latest. Do not miss a single session unless it's an emergency. Do you understand?" "Well, Your Honor, I have no choice now, do I? I'll go, but I need your firm promise in front of all these witnesses that when this is over, you'll keep your word. I've had enough surprises in my life over the last year." It pissed her off, but I didn't care. She agreed, and it made the album. I rejected the first 2 counselors after reading reviews of their work. Her lawyer suggested the next one, a team of a man and a woman with a very good reputation. I think Bonnie was surprised when I agreed. The first session was scheduled for Thursday at 6 o'clock. I arrived 15 minutes early and was surprised to see Bonnie already in the waiting room. She smiled at me, but didn't approach me. I immediately liked this couple. Josh and Jane Hart, they've been doing this kind of work for 6 years. I bet they had stories that would make your hair stand on end. Jane got right to the point. "We are not here to save your marriage, but we are not here to destroy it either. We are a neutral party, and it is not for us to judge, but to find a solution to your situation. If this is not what you expected, we are sorry to disappoint you. Here are the ground rules. You take turns speaking, and at this point you are talking to us, not your spouse. You may not interrupt. You will be polite. You will listen when it is time for your spouse to speak, just as he or she will listen to you. Do you understand? Don't nod off. We record these sessions, and you can get copies for your personal use if you want. We believe this protects all of us. If any allegation comes into question, it can be easily verified. We read your file and will first ask some questions to try to determine what you were thinking at the time in question. Who wants to tell their story first?" Bonnie went first. She told the story like it was some kind of fairy tale, talking about how much I loved the idea, but at the last minute, I chickened out and ran home in annoyance before she could follow through. It took her 45 minutes to tell me about my adventurous youth and how she always wished she had sown wild oats herself. Josh stopped her by telling her that time was up and we would continue the conversation at the next session. I thanked the counselors and left. Bonnie stayed behind, clearly trying to be alone with the counselors. She partly succeeded because they had a solo session scheduled. She was surprised when the counselors told me what she had done and offered me a chance to do the same. I said I would like to do it, but only after they heard my side of the story. They both agreed that it would be a great idea. It was getting close to time for the next session, and Bonnie was surprised when she was told to make time for me. I started talking about our early years and dating. You know, this was all before AIDS, or some of the more dangerous STDs prevalent today, were a reality, and we were just kids experimenting. My company was a little wiser and more relaxed about sex. You could sleep with a girl one night and the next night, she could be with another guy, and nobody got mad. Why? Because there were no expectations. No one made promises, so no one broke them, and if any of us got serious, the fooling around stopped immediately. Bonnie was a couple years younger, and didn't start dating us until the summer after graduation. Yes, I was her first and only lover until recently. We were exclusive from the first time we ended up together. I never missed the old lifestyle. It was fun at the time, but after a year of being in a relationship with Bonnie, I had matured a bit and was quite happy being exclusive. We got married, had 3 kids, worked hard, built a successful business, and became financially secure. I thought I had the American dream. I stopped to gather my thoughts. Bonnie tried to speak, but Jane signaled for her to be quiet. The rules, Bonnie. Soon it will be your turn again. Then 2 things happened. A friend passed away and left me a property that included the building where most of our adventures took place. One of our old company, a man I never particularly liked, moved back to town. He and his wife were swingers, and they soon began to promote their lifestyle. Almost every couple we socialized with fell for their bait, including my wife. From talking to flirting to light fooling around, it got to the point where everyone wanted to try to relive the past, or, in the case of Bonnie and a few others, try it for the first time. We fought about it for months. The first few times I kept my mouth shut, but then the hot tub incident happened. It upset me so much that I just left for a few days. I told them about it in detail, while Bonnie blushed furiously and kept her head down. After that, things went quiet for a while, and I thought it was over between us. Then she practically gave me an ultimatum: agree to the program, or she would do it without me. I was caught between a hammer and anvil. If I didn't agree and she did it anyway, it would definitely ruin our marriage. If I agreed, I might be able to salvage something, although it would never be the same again. In the end, I just couldn't do it. I begged her to stop and leave with me, but she said she was going along with it, and I would just have to accept it. That may not be the exact wording, but that was the gist of it. She made her decision, and I left. Now she expects me to, as she put it, just get over it and continue our relationship like nothing happened. She has told me that she is sorry she hurt my feelings, but not sorry that she did. Recently, she bluntly told me that if I don't return to my manhood and get back in her bed, she will invite someone else there. This was the deciding factor for me. It all comes down to trust. And how do I do that? Every time she's gone, I'll think she's slipped away on a date with one of her friends. How do I know that when we make love, she's not replaying in her head that it's someone else instead of being in that moment with me? And that, counselors, is why I want a divorce. I just don't have enough love in me to pretend it never happened. They nodded, realizing what I was getting at. I talked some more about how my life was shaping up. There were always things I wanted to try, things I wanted to do but ignored because I was a married man with responsibilities. Now, for the first time in my life, I can put myself first, at least for a little while. I stopped and laughed as they all looked at me. I'm sorry. It just occurred to me that I'm doing now what Bonnie was doing all along. They announced the time, and I stood up, grinning. They did their best to hide their smirks, and Bonnie had steam coming out of her ears as I left. The next few sessions were predictable to the point of boredom. This will never happen again. In time, we would get over it, and our marriage would be better than ever. I thought about it a lot, and talked to some experts, including the attorney I hired to handle my divorce case. At the next hearing, I showed up with a briefcase. I thought a lot about it. Bonnie, I think I've found a way to work this out and be together again. However, you're going to have to follow certain rules. Things you may not like. Bonnie looked happy for the first time, and the counselors looked at me warily. She wanted to say yes right away, but I asked her to wait until we'd talked it over. Point number 1. You will never socialize with Will, Grace, or Booger again in your life. You can have limited contact with the rest of the group because they were just having fun and being open about everything. Never means never, Bonnie. If you are in a cafe, restaurant, or any other public place, and one of them shows up there, you leave immediately unless I am with you. No phone calls, emails, texts, or Facebook. Not even smoke signals. Understood? She agreed too quickly for my taste, so I stepped it up. I'm serious, Bonnie. If you ever say hello to any of them again, the divorce will start all over again. I understand, Jimmy. I promise. Okay, next item. I need a note from our doctor. I know you've had different men, even if it was just once. I need to know you're clean before I touch you again. She was a little angry, but agreed. They were clean, honey. We all had to show medical clearance before we hit the road. How far in advance did you share your results? 2 or 3 weeks? I'm not sure, but it seems about right. And during those 2 or 3 weeks, did everyone stay celibate or stick to just one partner? Will and Grace belong to a club a few towns over from here and go there on average twice a month. And please don't ask me how I know. I think by now he was already trying to recruit you. Bonnie moved awkwardly. Well, he suggested we visit the club he belongs to right after we got home. No one supported him. What's next on your list? How noble of you. Really, Jimmy? You can stop being sarcastic. I screwed up. I'll admit it. Can we move on? I didn't write it down, but if you bring up topics like that again in our marriage, it will be over in an instant. It was evident that Bonnie was losing patience. I think I've learned my lesson on that score. Next. I pulled out the papers I was holding. Have your lawyer look them over. It's a postnuptial agreement. Basically, it states that if either of us have sexual intercourse with anyone outside of the marriage one more time and are discovered, they forfeit everything they accumulated during the marriage and leave without protest. No lapses, no exceptions, we just pack up and leave. I grinned. I took that from a story I read on one of the free sites. I guess it wasn't as grand a waste of time as you thought, huh? Bonnie didn't like it. Bonnie fussed and argued. Bonnie, surprised the hell out of me by agreeing to sign on the dotted line. She wanted me to come back to our house right after the last counseling session, 5 weeks from now. Then she'd sign the papers. I was shocked to the core. Never in a million years did I think she would sign such a draconian agreement. The counselor suggested that we go on a few dates and generally spend time together during the workday. It was weird dating Bonnie. The first meeting was incredibly awkward, but by the 3rd week we were together. By common consent, we still weren't having sex, but the petting had gotten pretty intense. One night she pulled away, giggling and pulling up her shirt. 2 more weeks, honey. I want you to rest, take your vitamins, maybe buy some blue pills. We've got a lot to catch up on. I drove off, grinning. Maybe this would work out. Bonnie eventually apologized, saying she was wrong and shouldn't have gone through with it, and I kind of believed her. But I knew that on some level, she was going to savor her memories for a long time to come. Modern technology is a wonderful thing. Personally, I find security cameras on every corner invasive, but that's the world we live in now. Every commercial property we owned had security cameras installed, all of which fed into our office or home computer. We also had a security company that checked the signal hourly. It was expensive, but it prevented several break-ins, and once stopped an arsonist who was about to set fire to part of the warehouse as revenge for a divorce. I got a call the day after my last date. It was our security manager. We exchanged pleasantries, after which he proceeded to ask the reason for the call. It's probably nothing, but there are a few gaps in the security footage in your event room. They only last for about an hour or so, going off and on again. There's no definite schedule. One time it was from 9 to 10 in the morning, another early in the morning, and a few at night, all before 10. We're sure someone is turning them off and then back on. It has to be someone with access to the codes. What do you want us to do? You can override the control, can't you? Turn it back on from the command center? Yes. Then the next time it happens, do it and call me. Make sure you take notes. I may need a recording. This disturbed me enough that I decided to check the hall. I walked around the grounds and through the building, smiling as always at the memories, and didn't find a single thing missing or misplaced. I was going to tell Bonnie about it during our date. Maybe she'd figure out why the cameras were going off at random times. The security company sent a technician over, and he inspected the entire system, finding nothing wrong. I went to lunch and forgot about it. 10 minutes after lunch, I received a message from the security company. Urgent situation. Respond immediately. I didn't write, but called. The captain on duty looked worried. Sir, at 12:55 the cameras went offline. We have resumed operations as per your instructions, and we have a delicate situation. What's the situation? If you have a laptop with you, log in and we'll send you a recording. After you see what's going on, we'll need to give you instructions on how to proceed." It was clear as mud. I walked back to the truck, pulled out my laptop and logged in. I was glad I was sitting in the truck. What I saw was not good for mixed viewing. There were 6 people in the building: Bonnie, Will, Grace, Booger, and 2 guys I didn't recognize. They were mostly unclothed. Bonnie was in an unusual pose. Grace was being double-teamed by Booger and another stranger. I stopped watching after 10 minutes. I ordered the security guys to keep recording and be sure to turn it off after 30 minutes, or even sooner if they acted like they were going to leave. So much for promises, I thought, almost logging out. Then I decided to listen to the audio recording and started it up again. Bonnie spoke as the sound became active. "I'm telling you guys, this is the last time. Grunt and I are almost back together, and I don't want to jeopardize my progress by continuing. If we do, we'll get caught sooner or later." Will smirked. "Since we got back, you've ridden as many men as I could get my hands on. Hell, the entire male section of our club has spent an evening with you at least once, not to mention 3 women. You're hooked, Bonnie. Now get in here and we'll continue this. If this is going to be the last time, which I don't believe for a minute, let's make it special." Bonnie walked over to him, smirking, and began. "I'm serious, Will. This will be the last time. For a long time, maybe forever. I love it, but I want my husband back more. Don't even think about trying to blackmail me. If word of this gets out, I'll make sure Jimmy goes after you and the whole club. We have money, Will, and he can make your life hell. Plus, at the very least, he'll beat the crap out of you. Remember how long it took for the swelling to go down from your balls? Imagine it 10 times worse, because he won't just kick you and walk away. Next time, he'll stomp those balls to mush." Will hesitated for a moment. "He attacked me from behind. Things would have been very different if we'd been face to face." Bonnie grinned. "Really? You're a good-looking man, Will, but you're soft. Jimmy still works with his crews and is very hard. He's learned a lot from working construction. He's not a black belt, but I'd always bet on him. Forget about that for now. Let's get down to business. You know the rule. 1 hour and the security system is back online. I'm surprised the security company didn't ask us a question about the gaps." With those words, she leaned in and continued. Will smirked as he continued to speak. "How about this? Have the club rent this place for a party. You'll have to be here, and Grunt probably isn't really interested in the business. We can decorate the place so that there are gaps in the coverage. We can even make a hole in the back. Remember how much you liked that when I took you to the bookstore?" She pulled away and looked up. "It was exciting, but it was a one-time thing, and I told you I'd never do it again. It was a bunch of strangers. This is going to be a club. We're all clean." Bonnie grinned. "I'll think about it. For now, time is ticking." In 50 minutes, she'd had fun with 3 of the 4 of them, and ended the festivities by lowering herself onto Grace. They cleaned up a bit, and Bonnie sprayed almost an entire can of air freshener. "I'm going to miss it." "Maybe not. Remember, the band wants to book a party here. You're already hooked, girl. A plain vanilla evening with your husband won't bring you satisfaction." "Yes, it will be. I'll take care of it. Let me think about the party, okay? If we do have one, it won't be until a few months from now. Until then, I'll have other priorities." She kissed everyone as they left, a simple gesture of friendship. When they were gone, she looked around. A sad expression appeared on her face. Then she pulled out her cell phone and called me. I heard the phone ring but put it to voicemail. Sighing, she closed the door of the building and our life together. I begged to cancel our date for that night, saying I was working on something and had a deadline. She asked if we could have dinner after the counseling session. I told her yes, if she still wanted it after the session. I didn't elaborate even when she asked. I showed up for counseling with a manila envelope. I'm sure Bonnie thought it was a prenup, so she didn't seem concerned. I started talking as soon as we were seated. "Bonnie, you've always been lucky. If it was noticed a few weeks later, you'd be in trouble, legally speaking. Instead, I found out about it now, and since you didn't sign the contract, it's going to be 50-50. I realized I could live with that. You've played as big a part in our success as I have, so it's only right that you get half." "Honey, I have no idea what you're talking about." I stared into her eyes for a moment before she shifted her gaze to me. I think at that moment, she realized what I knew. They say a picture is worth 1,000 words, so instead of talking, I'm going to let you look at this. I handed her the envelope, and she took it with shaking hands. She pulled out the first picture, looked at it, and fainted. The pictures scattered across the floor, some falling face up. Jane knelt to check on Bonnie's condition, and Josh picked up the photo and studied it for a minute. I know it's frustrating, Jimmy. We have no idea when they were taken or where. It was probably right after the incident at the resort. There are timestamps on them, Josh. 3 days ago, in the event room we own. I'd say we're officially done with the sessions, wouldn't you? Even if you don't think so, I'm never going back. Tell her when she comes to her senses not to fight the divorce, or things will get ugly real quick, and I'll drag all her cronies down with me. I was almost to the truck when I heard a scream. Apparently, she'd come back to life. Of course, she resisted, putting up one roadblock after another. Only after I made my lawyer serve all her buddies with subpoenas to appear in court did she stop. 4 months later, I was divorced. Things didn't work out so well for Will. Grace wanted to know why he was called in, and when she found out, she was furious. Rumors started flying, not from me. I got what I wanted and got on with it, and Will was fired for doing a bad job. No one wanted to touch him, and he had to leave town. Everyone was surprised when Grace stayed. She found a really good job and liked it so much that she went to the CEO, told him the whole story, and offered incentives to let her stay. The man was single, and he decided that a gift at lunch would level the rumors. He was single, and 2 months later, she moved in with him. Part of her new job required traveling with him, and there was gossip that she was adding extra incentives for clients to sign contracts. They seemed happy together. It took another 6 months to divide the money and business responsibilities. Bonnie still ran the office, I handled the cruise, Jules handled the real estate, and the profits after expenses were split in half. This required very little communication from us. Surprising her, I insisted that since the shack was assigned to me, I would remain the sole owner, forgoing the equivalent value of the other assets. When her lease came to an end, I refused to renew the agreement, effectively shutting down the business. Her tirade was grandiose, and I recorded everything I could on my phone. She tried to take me back to court. When that didn't work, she wanted to buy me out. I sent her a voicemail. I'll burn it to the ground first. That was the end of it. I woke up when she slid into bed and lay on top of me. When I reached up and wrapped my arms around her, my eyes flew open. Good morning, Vicky. How long have you been here? She pressed herself against me, and I loved the sensation. Then she giggled. We just got here. So, you and Jen? This is the 5th time we've been here since she's been around us. Are you two living together again, or what? I thought of slim, trim Jen, 12 years younger and many years nicer. After the divorce, I took an extended vacation, went back to the lake I loved so much, looked around, and bought a boat. It wasn't one of those little 40-foot one-bedroom boats, but a 72-foot houseboat. I had been on my own for a week when she showed up. How did you find me? She grinned. I won't tell. I might need to if you run away again. Now invite me aboard. I did so, turned around, went into a secluded cove, and dropped anchor. It was the middle of the week, so hardly anyone was out. I bought her a soft drink and lemonade for myself, and we sat and watched the lake. I wasn't running, I said after about 30 minutes. I just wanted to take my mind off all the drama for a while, to relax and not think about anything extra. How do you do it? Look around, Jen. There are no people, lots of nature. The setting is relaxing. Why are you here? Her smirk was kind of evil. Would you believe I was worried about you? Yes, worried, but you seem to be fine. In fact, I came all the way here because of a promise. What promise? We promised each other that if you divorced, I would be your first lover after marriage. I think we've set all the prerequisites. I stared at her as she giggled. How warm is this water? It's the middle of August. The temperature of the lake is about 80. Why? She stood up, undid the straps of her short sundress, and let it out onto the deck. She was wearing a pair of panties, which she quickly popped out of. Her wicked grin returned as she smoothly parted the water and surfaced 20 feet away from him, floating on her back. Coming in? It took about 15 seconds to remember that I was single and hadn't promised anything to anyone. 15 seconds after that, I threw off my shorts and tank top and dove into the water. The water was gorgeous. I surfaced, spitting up, and she swam up to me, wrapped her arms around my neck, and lowered herself until she was at my back, pressing herself against my back. I could feel her hard nipples as she rubbed against me. That was a pretty good package, darling, what I had time to see. When we get back to your yacht, I'll need to examine it more closely, maybe do a stress test to see if we're a good fit for each other. What do you think? I think we need to swim back to the boat right now. She reached for me. Oh, that feels so good. She squeezed me and pushed off. We spent another 30 minutes swimming and exploring each other in the process. Finally, it's time, sweetie. We swam back, and I let her climb the ladder first, biting her firm cheek when she was at face level. She gave a little shriek, and for a moment playfully wrinkled her nose. I have a better use for that mouth. Come on. We barely had time to swing over the railing before we were on top of each other. She squeaked. Soon, her legs were locked behind me. It had been a long time coming for me, so in less than 5 minutes I felt the eruption coming. Honey, I'm about to finalize this scenario. All ready, she said, wrapping her legs tighter around me. Leave it alone, sweetheart. The weather was dry for a long time. It was dripping like a bucket, and it was pretty muddy. We both lay panting like we'd run a marathon, and then she giggled. How long has it been? I felt like years had passed. I think I've caught up, though. Oh, no, it isn't. We won't move until it happens again, and you'd better take your time, baby. I was just as aroused as you were, but now that the tension has been released, I expect to fully enjoy myself. We got up, cleaned up a little, and walked to the living room, settling on the couch. 20 minutes later, she was in my lap. We managed to last a decent 20 minutes that time. After finishing all those sessions, I rolled off her, panting. Honey, you need to go easy on the old man. When I find it, by all means. But right now I'm hungry. Is there anything to eat in this tub? She walked through the galley and bedrooms, making approving noises as I made sandwiches. She frowned in the bathroom. The shower isn't big enough for the two of us. The boat, remember? Limited space. If you want to take a shower, we'll have to go home. Oh no, you're stuck with me for the next 2 weeks. We'll find a way to improvise. We made a small meal and ate it aft, watching the light fade and the moon rise. Beautiful view. Yes, it is. She looked back to see me looking at her and smirked. Was I worth the wait? You're worth the wait, and you're worth your weight in gold to me this very second. That's a good answer, sweetheart. You love me, you fed me, and now I'm ready to clean myself up and head to the bedroom. Better not have a small bed in there. At that point, I was very glad I had chosen the model with the double bed. She took a shower and then handed it to me. I got out and realized I needed to buy more towels when we got back to the marina. We pressed against each other, and she was just telling me about the wonderful things she was going to do to me when she stopped talking and let out a light snore. I grinned into the darkness and pulled her against me. I woke up to a very pleasant sensation, watching the sheet move up and down. I threw it back and she giggled. I'm glad that part of you is waking up pretty quickly. Good morning, sweetie. We'll make breakfast later. I'm a little busy right now. She shrieked in surprise. Jen quickly forgot what she was doing, as those sessions were also over very quickly. That's enough. Now keep your hands and that wonderful mouth to yourself while I finish what I was trying to do before you interrupted me. 10 minutes later, I exploded. Jen choked up a little and giggled as she came to her senses. I see you're still working backwards. We'll get you back up to normal in no time. She jumped up and ran to the bathroom. Soon I heard the shower running, so I got up and made coffee. She came in. I tried to kiss her, but she pushed me away. The shower, and your breath smells, so brush those gums. I showered, shaved, and brushed my teeth. I stepped outside. We need to go back to the marina to get my suitcase. Then we need to go grocery shopping. We drove back, and I took her suitcase. I took her to a small restaurant, and she liked the food. Then we went to the grocery store. I pushed the stroller, watching her inspect each grocery before putting it in the basket. And I remembered doing the same thing with Bonnie when July was about 9 years old. I remembered my child's happy chatter as Bonnie bestowed a small smile on me, remembering the glorious morning we had spent. For a moment, I felt incredibly sad. Earth to Jimmy, where did you disappear to? I smiled at her concerned face and thought how lucky the other visitors must have been to have such a young woman as my companion. A little trip down memory lanes, dear. It's a good trip. Let's check out the steak selection. The first week we did it like monkeys, catching up. By the second week we slowed down and started talking more. Booger was still swinging, but he was having trouble. He has to have a partner or he can't participate. He approached me twice wanting to rekindle our relationship. Both times I asked him if he was still doing the same thing, and he admitted that he was. Do you expect me to participate? If so, you can leave. With the right circumstances, a trip to the island could have been amazing, but you and Will have turned it into something mediocre. She paused for a moment, deep in thought, before continuing. Do you know he resisted divorce until I took your book and threatened to publicize his habits? He backed down quickly. Now I look at him and feel sad. He's gained about 30 pounds and has started combing his hair to hide his baldness. If we were still together and swinging, he'd be a consolation prize. I shudder to think what his band looks like judging him. You know, I try very hard not to judge people who choose this lifestyle. If it works for them, and if both partners agree unconditionally, I see the appeal. I've read the data. Such people make up a very small number of married couples, and they are 90% more likely to divorce than normal couples. All in all, a pretty dangerous lifestyle if you want to maintain a committed relationship. However, some people are not made for fidelity to one person, and this is a perfectly acceptable alternative. I sighed. I didn't divorce Bonnie because she wanted to experiment. I thought we had it backwards until I saw those tapes. I divorced her because she chose that path and lied about it constantly, knowing how I felt. It was very obvious that she preferred that lifestyle over her old one, and I couldn't live with that. Jen hesitated for a moment. I could have told you. You're going to find out sooner or later anyway. Bonnie is really into this lifestyle right now. She's partnering with Booger to attend events, and she's not particularly secretive about it. She says that now that she's single, it doesn't matter who thinks what. Your children are not particularly happy with her right now. I tried to shield the children from the consequences of our divorce, but they were old enough and pretty savvy, so it didn't take long for them to learn the truth. They still had a relationship with their mother, but it was strained now. Our child, Julie, took it the hardest and hasn't spoken to her in months. Bonnie blames me for everything, even though I refused to discuss our breakup with them. We spent the last few days together, mostly talking and cuddling. I was leaving with her, interrupting my self-exile. Time to get back to life. Before we left, we had a rather frank conversation. I don't know about you, but I'd like to keep seeing you when we get home. Maybe we're just rebuff lovers, but I'd like to see if there's something more behind it. I kissed her. I'm going to date you until you find someone else or tell me to stop. I touched her lightly to prove my point. She jumped and grinned. I'm not looking for anyone else. So if I was in a serious relationship, why was I in bed with Vicky? After a few months, Jen and I were quite an established couple. She wanted to move in with us, and I seriously considered it. We both agreed that we didn't want to get married now, but we needed a partner. Jen and I were in the restaurant when Vicky and Rhonda walked in. They saw us and looked unsure until I waved at them. By this time, it had been over a year since that infamous trip to the island. We stood hugging each other and insisted they join us. We chatted for a bit, and then Vicky grinned. So you and Jen? I thought it might happen. Jen's had a crush on you for a long time. Jen blushed and the smirk grew even wider. I knew if you got to him first, we'd be out of luck. I should be mad, but I'm happy for both of you. But that doesn't mean we regret not sleeping with both of you. Curiosity took over. Did you have more little vacations after the islands? Rhonda cut in. You mean, have we tried doing it again? No, the last time wasn't very memorable, except for Jason and Annette. Before she could finish, a happy couple entered the room. They looked around for a table, saw us, had a quick conversation, and went out the door. Jason, wait, I'd like to talk to you for a minute if you don't mind, and so would Annette. Would you mind coming back and joining us? I promise there won't be any fireworks. He looked at her, and she nodded slightly. Annette had dyed her hair and let it grow out. The almost platinum curls contrasted nicely with the creamy tone of her skin. That's fine, girl. If you're not careful, you'll show yourself to Beyoncé. Do the carpets match the drapes now? She tensed, then giggled. I thought you'd remember, Grunt. The carpet's gone. How could I have forgotten? But that was a year ago, and things might have changed now. By this time, we were back in the house, and the three anxious women were watching our approach. Annette pulled Jen to her and hugged her, then looked at Vicky. Damn girl, help me. I don't think I have the strength. Give me a hug. Vicky jumped up, Rhonda following. Annette hugged both of them, and all the girls hugged Jason. We pushed the two tables together, and it was just like old times, as long as no one brought up the recent past. Jason was uncomfortable, so I brought it up to lighten the mood. Jason, I just want you and Annette to know that I don't hold a grudge against you. I don't think either of you fooled around with Bonnie, and if you did, well, that's what we were there for. Everyone who stayed after Jen and I left had to follow their conscience. Jason said he'd be more comfortable talking privately, and we didn't talk about it again. We'd been there for an hour when I realized how much I'd missed it. Finally, the waiters escorted us out with looks, and we paid the bill and left a big tip. We all stood outside, not wanting to lose the feeling of renewed friendship. I was inspired. I grabbed Jen's hand and called over my shoulder, Guys, follow us! I doubted they would do it, but all the cars got in line. I'm sure they were shocked when I pulled into the parking lot of our old shack. Although I didn't renew the lease, I let Bonnie and Jules use it until their last customer left. That was 2 weeks ago. I changed the locks and video surveillance, and now no one could get in without keys. I called security on the way in, telling them that I was the one who was going in and was going to disable the cameras from inside for a while, and when I turned them back on, I would let them know. I had my own selection of spirits in a lockbox, so I pulled it out and set the bottles on the bar. Jen would want a Cosmo, so I made her a cocktail, and then mine. 3 fingers of bourbon and 2 ice cubes with water on the side. I proposed a toast as they each took a drink in their hands. To 2 people who didn't do anything in this room, here's to you, Jason and Jen. Everyone was laughing. We relaxed and chatted for 2 hours before we headed out for the night, just enjoying the company. I only had 1 drink, and Annette had 2, so she drove Jason home, and I loaded Vicky and Rhonda into our car and drove them around. Vicky could barely walk, but I had to carry Rhonda in my arms. I took off their shoes, Jen unbuttoned their clothes, and we left them. We had just sat down when we heard giggling, which quickly turned to grunts and squeals. Jen thought it was a great idea to make our own noise, so we did. 30 years of construction work makes you get up early whether you want to or not, so I got up, making breakfast for everyone at 8. 30 minutes later, Vicky came out completely topless. I grinned. Vic, don't go anywhere near the stove. I don't want bacon grease splattered on you. She looked down and saw that she was without everything. Blushing a little, she started to walk back to the bedroom, then turned around. Nothing you haven't seen before, and I'm dying for a cup of coffee. She set the cup down and sat at the table while I finished my breakfast, as if sitting naked at the kitchen table was the most normal thing in the world. Rhonda walked in 20 minutes later, glanced at Vicky and smirked, taking off the t-shirt she'd borrowed from Jen. She then grabbed a cup of coffee, motioned to Vicky, and asked if she had a headache. They were both a little tipsy, but not as much as they thought. Jen came out last, wearing a robe. She stopped and stared at me for a moment, then took it off, and I had the pleasure of serving breakfast to the 3 women. They stayed most of the morning and then left, hugging and kissing. I smirked at Jen as she loaded the dishwasher. I guess we're friends again. She laughed softly. They wish they were even friendlier. They told me the worst part about going to the island was missing their chance at you. And me. I was a little surprised. Jen had never shown any interest in women. Would you? She paused, pondering. I think I would, if there was a time and place. I've always been curious, and this would be a safe place to explore. I can still picture us all rolling around on the bed together and smashing it. Something to think about. Jason called me the next day and asked me to come to the studio. I may have to expand. I've gotten more staff, some really good producers and engineers. Jerry is trying to talk me into starting my own label to maximize profits. I'm thinking about it. I'd love to get your opinion on the redesign. His business must be booming. The building wasn't even 2 years old. I know he used Jules to house recording artists there. They usually stayed for 2 to 4 weeks, and she set aside a couple houses specifically for Jason. If anything was damaged beyond normal wear and tear, it was spelled out in the contract that they were responsible for repairs. One rock band went on a rampage and trashed the house, but the management paid for the repairs without complaint. We didn't put them up again. I agreed to come late in the evening the next day. I was surprised to see that there were a lot of people in the audience. Jason grinned. Musicians don't get up very early. Some, if they have the energy, record before dawn. We make adjustments, and if the producer and engineer agree, they stay. These midnight sessions have made a pretty good product. He pointed to a gold record on the wall. It belonged to the first country singer he'd ever worked with and was titled Midnight Sessions. He led me into his office, and I paused for a second in front of Earl's bass voice. I just left it there. I figured you'd want it back sooner or later. All you have to do is say the word. I think she's happier here among the music. Jason nodded, realizing how one musician understood the other. Still playing? I used to play. My equipment was now stored at the shack, but I had my old Martin with me, and sometimes, especially right after the island, I would play, trying to fill the hole in my heart. It didn't happen, of course, but it still made me feel better. Jason picked up a couple guitars. Let me play you something. Tell me what you think. He played in a light jazz style, going up and down. I thought it was one of the most impressive things I'd ever heard, and told him so when he finished. He laughed. She's pretty good, even though I wrote her. Now I have to find the words for it. Earl was the lyrics writer in our partnership, and I'm having a hard time with that. It took me 4 months to finish Daughter. Earl always told me you were the best lyric writer he'd ever seen. That surprised me to no end. Earl and I had tried writing a few times when no one else came to practice. Even then, I thought that shit was pretty juvenile and told Jason so. He just laughed and handed me a second guitar. Think about it. Then we played for almost an hour, old out cold songs, a couple Tom Petty songs including Wildflowers, and a Bob Seger song I'd always liked. Jason had a good, if not strong voice, and I thought it all sounded great. We put the guitars away and talked about expanding it. You're going to have to go vertical, Jason. You don't have enough property to go outside. You could see it hadn't occurred to him. Second floor? You have a tiered area. I would choose 3 to leave room for expansion if you need it in the future. If you don't need it, you can always rent it out and generate a little income to help cover the cost of the expansion. Jason was thrilled with the idea. Are you going to do it? I was going to ask you a couple months ago, but we haven't talked since the trip, and I figured it was best to leave the sleeping dogs lying around. You were my best friend even before Earl died. It's been painful not talking to you for so long. I was surprised, but then I thought about it. He was right. Maybe the connection through Earl was why I'd grown attached to Jason, even more than I had with my old friends. I missed his wit and Annette's sarcastic sarcasm, which I didn't want to admit. Do you want to talk about it now? I knew you were against it at first. I told Netta that I didn't think you could do it. Bonnie kept insisting that you were okay with it, and when you agreed, I assumed you were. I have to admit, Net and I laughed our asses off when you included the stipulation about Will's absence in the plans. We watched you on the airplane, and we both agreed that you didn't look happy. She told me that when it came down to it, she didn't think you could handle it, and she was right. So, what happened after Jen and I left? Jason grinned. Well, Will and Grace showed up. Coupled with you leaving, it gave me some bad thoughts. But he was knocked out. His balls swelled to the size of baseballs, and he sat with an ice pack for 2 days. Booger and Bonnie kept insisting that everything was fine, but we didn't buy it. Vicky and Rhonda decided they weren't going to spend time with Booger. He got very angry when they told him that, insisted they were breaking the rules. Vic laughed. What the fuck are the rules? We agreed to do this with anyone you're comfortable with, and Rhonda and I decided you were scaring us a little, so no pleasures for you. He paused, remembering, and a small smile appeared on his face. They locked the doors after Annette and I got there. We had our own little party. It was a good thing all the girls were bi, or they would have been disappointed. But still, we had a good time, and I managed to have at least one time with all of them. It wore me out. Then he frowned. Before we go any further, I have to tell you this. The girls left me to sleep and went off to breakfast. I woke up to someone riding me. By the time I realized it was Bonnie, I was halfway through, so I let it happen. When we finished, I got out of bed and grumbled a little, but she just smirked and suggested we do it again. About that time, the girls came back and chased her away. That's the hardest part. Later, we decided to go to the beach one last time before we left. We walked around the cove and found Bonnie and Booger and two strangers. They were very engrossed and didn't even notice us. We came back, packed up, and left. I think it was 2 days before Bonnie came back. Curiosity took over. I wonder what made her do that. To go from faithful, loving wife to rocket in less than a year. She never explained it in our sessions, other than to say she felt old and unattractive and wanted to try other men before she got too old. As superficial as it sounds, Jim, it's probably true. She must have been thinking about it before Will came back into your life. He found the spark and gassed her until she stopped thinking with her logical brain and started using her lizard brain. On some level, she must have known it could cost her you, but whether it was a conscious decision or not, she made it. I think everything that happened afterward happened because she knew she never had a realistic chance of getting you back. The love the one you're with mentality. You should talk to Annette. She probably understands more about this than I do. Most of what I'm telling you is derived from her. Perhaps he was right. Annette was a school psychologist with a relevant degree. I made a note to invite her to lunch. Jason changed the subject. So, you and Jen? Cradle robber. He grinned when he said that, and I grinned back. Yeah, me and Jen. I don't know for how long. The age difference is pretty big, but right now I think we both need it. We make each other happy, and more importantly, we trust each other. We made plans to bring in the architect we used for the original building for a consultation to see if the upper floors were viable, and I left feeling much better. I took Annette out to lunch to talk about what had happened. Believe it or not, she did what many women do when they start to feel old and unwanted. It doesn't matter if their spouses love them or find them attractive, they feel they need validation from the outside. Most don't take it to the extreme like Bonnie, but it happens. Plus, there is a lot of talk about female empowerment in the atmosphere of this time. Read any major women's magazine, and there is bound to be at least one article on the subject. Many, without justifying it, hint that affairs can be good and enrich relationships. Look at Ashley Madison and dozens of other sites promoting this sort of thing. It's big business right now. Shouldn't they have realized how dangerous it was? Most do, but they minimize it. Most situations are not like ours. Usually one spouse goes behind the other's back and tries to keep things private. A lot of people get caught, of course, but many more don't. Recent data shows that women who cheat, even if they've been doing it for years, rarely get caught. More than 3/4 get away with it and take their secrets to the grave. The same is true for men. The figures are a little lower, but not by much. It is estimated that in 70% of all marriages, at least one partner cheats. Those are pretty depressing numbers, Net. She sighed. Depressing, but true. Let's say your child starts kindergarten today. By the time they graduate, 54% of their classmates will be the children of divorcees. I can't tell you how many times I've had a crying teenager sitting in my office trying to figure that out. I won't be able to do your job. That's because you more or less have a black and white worldview. My job makes me act like I'm colorblind. It's all shades of gray, but every once in a while I help a kid, and that keeps me going. We finished lunch with a sincere promise to meet again, and we did. I started playing golf with Jason and Rhonda again, even though she kicked our asses regularly. Jen and Vicky would relax by the pool and then meet us at the 19th hole for drinks and snacks. Jason brought one of his new engineers into our group so we could have a foursome, and we immediately disliked him because he beat us all without even trying. Other than golf, he was a hell of a nice guy, and his wife was a cutie. I'd been puzzling over what to do with the shack for a long time. I didn't want it so much as I didn't want Bonnie to have it, especially when I saw what she was using it for. The alarm went off one Saturday, just after we'd played around, so we jumped in the cars and went to look. No big deal. A dead branch from one of the oak trees surrounding the house flew off, fell onto the deck, and hit the glass, triggering the alarm. The cops came, made sure we had to be there, said I needed tree service to check those old oak trees, and left. Ed and Sandy had never been inside, didn't know it existed. They were fascinated by the place, and Sandy demanded to know why it was no longer in use. Jason quickly interrupted her, saying that the place had a lot of history, and he would tell her about it later. 3 days later, she caught up with me at the construction site where I was working. I was surprised to see her, and she said it wasn't small talk. She insisted on taking me out to lunch while she made her proposal. She had a degree in hospitality management, but after they moved, she never found anything she liked. "I'd like you to reopen the hall and let me run it. We'll split expenses and profits 50-50. Let's sign a contract for 6 months to see if we can manage." I liked the idea. I wasn't losing anything on the building, but I wasn't making any money either. It would be a good way to keep the building from falling into disrepair or becoming a magnet for vandals. I immediately agreed, telling her I would have Jerry prepare the paperwork. Sandy expressed concern that since she wasn't local, she would have a harder time attracting customers. I laughed and said that until we closed, we had a monopoly on the market. Apparently, fate had a sense of humor, because it was at that moment that Jules walked into the diner. She saw me and started to turn around. We hadn't talked much since the breakup. I guess she felt she had to stay loyal to her sister, and honestly, I was a little hurt. I felt like she should have known me well enough to discourage Bonnie from starting a conversation about the very thing. Now that's water under the bridge. "Jules, where were you going? Please come back to the house. There's someone I want you to meet, and I think it's time we had a talk after this, don't you? I won't rant, I promise, and if I get loud, turn me off. I've loved you as a friend for too long not to try to bury the hatchet. Again, I'm asking nicely." She argued for a bit before smiling. A little unsure, but she agreed, both to going back to the house and to talking later. I led her back inside, and after she gave her order to the waitress, introduced her to Sandy. "Jules, this is Sandy Reynolds. She's a friend of Jason's. Her husband is one of his engineers. She's also one of my friends, and she has certain ideas about the shack. It's time to open it up again." A strange expression appeared on Jules' face. "Before we discuss this, I should tell you that Bonnie and I are building a similar establishment on part of the old Johnson farm. I got the contract to subdivide the property, and it's zoned mixed use, so we bought 3 lots, brought in an architect to draw up plans, got permits, and have already laid the foundation. We plan to open in 6 to 8 months. I was a little surprised, and Jules sighed. Bonnie loved this place, Grunt. It was something she made her own, and she was very proud of the way she and I built the business. We were very hurt when you took it away from us. Bonnie will be furious when I tell her. When you tell her that if she hadn't resurrected him in her little shack, we could have continued on. I wasn't going to let her use it as a place for the very thing, and I've heard enough of the security footage to know that's what would have happened. Think of how much business would have been lost if this had gotten out. This is a pretty conservative town, Jules. The place would go out of business in 6 months. Maybe you should put it in the operating agreement that it doesn't happen here. Sandy listened without taking his eyes off me. Jules put her hand on mine. Please, Jimmy, this is not the place to hang dirty laundry. We'll deal with it later, I promise. Right now, with the situation we're in, I can't help you. Bonnie will see it as a betrayal, and our relationship is a little strained right now. While we ate, she had time to tell Sandy a few things. Then she got up and, surprising me, kissed me on the cheek. I've missed you, Jimmy. Call me at the office when you want to talk. Sandy watched her walk away. Wow, what a worm opened up, huh? I don't know, and it's none of my business. I'll have to do without her advice. Next time you're at Jason's, tell him I said it's okay if he wants to tell the story. He might not want to, and if he doesn't, that's the end of the conversation. As the narrator of this fascinating story, let's summarize the exciting twists and turns and events our characters experienced in this chapter. Jimmy, our protagonist, found himself entangled in a complex web of relationships and emotions. From the shores of an island vacation to the difficulties of life after divorce, his journey has been filled with unexpected surprises. Surprises as unexpected as our exclusive Patreon, where you can listen to the stories before anyone else and enjoy furiously because there's no bullshit censorship. In the early part of this chapter, we witnessed the aftermath of a passionate night with Jen, only to be interrupted by the sudden appearance of Booger and Bonnie, leading to a confrontation that revealed the complexities of their intertwined lives. Jimmy's reflections on his past with Bonnie hinted at the scars of a failed marriage and its impact on their children. As the plot progressed, Vicky and Rhonda appeared, giving us a glimpse into the unusual lifestyles that some of the characters explore. Reuniting with old friends triggered memories of an island adventure, shedding light on the aftermath of that fateful trip. The story took an unexpected turn as Jimmy and Jen faced the challenges of a budding relationship, raising questions of loyalty, commitment, and the ever-changing dynamics of love. The revelation about Bonnie's current election added another layer of complexity to the narrative, creating a bridge between past and present. In the midst of this intriguing relationship, the shack emerges as a key element. Sandy's suggestion to reopen the shack emphasizes the recurring theme of the influence of the past on the present. Jules's disclosure of such an endeavor adds a new dimension to the story, setting the stage for potential conflicts and resolutions. Join me in the next chapter where secrets may be revealed, alliances may change, and characters face the consequences of their choices. Remember, the full, uncensored version awaits you on our Patreon. Stay tuned as this fascinating narrative unfolds.